The real reason why humans are banned from galactic war, the chamber of the Galactic conquered was built to impress. It hung like a silver ring inside a hollowed asteroid, with wide windows looking out into a slow river of stars. Light from distant suns slid across the polished floor in long bands, like quiet water. Every seat was shaped for a different body. Some were tall and narrow, some were low like shallow bowls, some were half-floating cradles that held their guests in soft fields of gravity. Ambassador Lurie of the Sovan Triarchy arrived early, as she always did. Her people believed that punctuality was a form of respect, and she had learned that respect was the only currency that spent well in the conquered. She moved with careful grace, her long coat trailing behind her, and sat in a seat adjusted to her posture. Around her, attendants drifted between rows, carrying tablets and cups and translation nodes. Today's session was supposed to be routine. Border disputes, shipping routes. A trade complaint about rare minerals, the kind of meeting that filled a calendar and emptied a soul. Then she saw the agenda line that made her throat tighten. Humanity, petition for revised classification. Lurie stared at the words until they blurred, humans again. Always the humans, even when they were not present. She had never met one. Few had. Humans kept to their systems near the Orion Spur, quiet and polite, signing treaties, paying their dues, smiling in public feeds. They were considered young, clever, and strangely cautious. But they were also the only known species with a single sentence written into the Conquered's founding charter. Humans are banned from galactic war, not restricted, not regulated, banned. Lurie looked around and tried to read the room. The older delegates were arriving now. They moved slowly, like living history. The Keth archivist's shell was stained with ceremonial ink. The Veil speaker's wide eyes never blinked. The Enharan marshal carried his cane like a weapon, even though weapons were forbidden here. When the elders took their places, the noise in the chamber lowered. Conversations shrank. Even the air felt different, as if everyone had agreed to breathe more softly. Lurie's assistant, a young Sovan named Rel, leaned close. "Ambassador," he whispered, "why is the human item so far down the agenda? If it's important, shouldn't it be near the top?" Lurie kept her gaze forward. "Because," she said quietly, "people hide what they fear by pretending it is small." Rel swallowed. He had read about the ban, of course. Everyone had. It was taught the way children were taught not to touch a flame, not with details, but with tone. The session began with the usual ritual. A bell rang. A line of light ran around the ring of the chamber. A voice, smooth and artificial, announced that the Conquered was in lawful assembly. Translation fields adjusted. Recorders spun up. The High Mediator, an old Thrin whose skin shimmered like layered glass, floated to the central platform. "Delegates," the Mediator said, "we gather in peace as our charter demands." Everyone answered with the same phrase in a dozen languages that the chamber turned into one unified sound. "In peace." The first hours passed like dust drifting, a dispute about a mining claim. A complaint about tariff changes. Lurie listened, spoke when needed, and kept one part of her mind pinned to the human line on the agenda like a needle holding fabric in place. At last the Mediator paused, and the lights in the chamber shifted slightly, cooler and sharper. That tiny change was enough to make 100 spines stiffen. "We now proceed," the Mediator said, "to the matter of humanity's petition." A murmur rolled through the seats. It was not loud, but it carried weight like distant thunder. The Mediator raised a hand. "By request, the human representative will address the Conquered." A door that had not been visible in the wall became a thin seam of light. It widened. The air in the chamber felt suddenly too dry. A human walked in. Lurie had expected something dramatic. A towering warrior species, a creature built for combat. Instead, the human looked almost fragile. 2 arms, 2 legs, upright posture. Skin a warm shade somewhere between pale stone and copper. Dark hair pulled back neatly. A simple suit with no ornaments. No visible weapons, of course, but that was required of everyone here. The human's steps were quiet. The floor did not tremble. The human did not glare or posture. They carried a small case in one hand, like a clerk bringing paperwork. Still, the reaction around the chamber was immediate. The elder species did not gasp or shout. They did something stranger. They went still. The Keth archivist, who moved slowly even on good days, froze mid-motion like a statue. The Enharan marshal's grip tightened on his cane. The Veil speaker's eyes widened further, as if trying to take in more information than their skull could hold. Lurie felt cold spread through her chest. She had negotiated with warlords and smugglers and pirate councils. She had never seen fear this clean, this controlled. The human reached the platform and stopped at the marked line. Their gaze swept the chamber, not in challenge, but in careful attention, like someone entering a room full of sleeping children. They bowed slightly. "Honored mediator." "Esteemed delegates," the human said, and the translation fields made the voice clear and calm in every ear. "I am Envoy Mara Ven of the Solarian Compact. Thank you for hearing us." The mediator's voice remained steady, but Lurie noticed the smallest pause before it spoke. A hesitation, a moment of measuring. "Envoy Ven," the mediator said, "your people request a revised classification under the charter. State your petition." The human opened the case and removed a thin tablet. The action was simple, but it drew attention as if it were a threat. Lurie saw a few security drones shift position near the ceiling. Their lights blinked, faint and anxious. "Our petition," Ven said, "is not to remove the Concord's protections. We respect the charter. We have complied with the ban for generations, but the galaxy has changed. Conflict expands into new regions. New species join the conquered. Some have asked why humans are forbidden from taking part in unified defense actions, even when invited. Our current classification labels humans as a prohibited combat participant. We request to be reclassified as a non-combat strategic support member, so we can legally provide aid during crises without violating the charter." Lurie felt her assistant shift beside her. Rel whispered, "That sounds reasonable." Reasonable. Yes, that was what made it worse. The mediator turned slightly, letting the delegates speak. A young delegate from the Lumen Guild rose, their body a swirl of light within a shell of crystal. "Envoy Ven," the Lumen said, "your people are peaceful traders. Why would strategic support be a concern? Surely you can offer medical assistance and logistics without changing your classification." Ven nodded. "We already do when permitted. But our classification blocks certain support roles. For example, our rescue ships may not enter active combat zones under Concord law, even to retrieve civilians. Our engineers may not assist with defensive systems if those systems might be used during a conflict. It creates delays. People die in those delays." That struck a nerve. A ripple of discomfort moved across the chamber. The Enharan Marshal spoke next. His voice was gravel, translated into clean words. "Then perhaps," he said, "the solution is not to adjust your label, but to strengthen the ban. Humans are safer kept away from war entirely." There it was, the old rule spoken out loud. The weight of it pressed down on the chamber. Ven did not react with anger. They did not even look surprised. "Marshal," Ven said, "with respect, the ban already keeps us away. We are asking only to save lives when others are at war." The Keth archivist raised one clawed hand, slow as a planet turning. "You speak of saving lives," the archivist said. "That is always the first argument. A clean beginning. Tell me, human, do your people understand why the ban exists?" The question landed like a heavy object dropped into water. Lurie leaned forward without meaning to. All around her, delegates quieted. Even those who disliked the human seemed hungry for the answer. Ven's face remained calm, but a tightness appeared around the eyes, a small sign of strain. "Yes," Ven said. "We understand the story that is told." The archivist's voice sharpened. "The story that is told is not the same as the truth. Do you know the truth?" Ven paused. It was only a second, but in a room like this, a second was a confession. "Our archives," Ven said carefully, "contain records from the founding era. They are incomplete. Some were damaged. Some were redacted before we received them. We know that humans participated in a conflict long ago. We know the Conquered was formed afterward. We know the ban was written into the charter at that time. Beyond that, we know only what others have chosen to repeat." Lurie's stomach twisted. "Redacted by whom? The Conquered itself. The elder species." A delegate from the Xi Collective spoke with a buzzing voice. "Then why ask for changes now if you do not know the full reason you are restricted?" Ven's eyes moved to the Xi seat. "Because," Ven said, "we have spent generations proving we can coexist peacefully. We have honored every treaty. We have never expanded by force. We have offered technology and medicine freely during disasters. Yet when a crisis turns violent, we are locked out by law. People assume the ban exists because humans are dangerous. That belief spreads. It becomes rumor. Rumor becomes hate. Hate becomes preemptive fear." The human's voice stayed soft, but the meaning cut through the chamber like a clean blade. Lurie saw a few younger delegates exchange uneasy looks. She had heard the rumors. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were stubborn. Humans had war in their blood. Easy words passed around like cheap food. The mediator asked, "Do you claim the ban is unjust?" Ven shook their head. "We claim it is misunderstood, and misunderstandings break peace as surely as weapons do. We ask the conquered to clarify the intent of the ban. If the goal is to prevent human aggression, then classify us by behavior, not by ancestry. If the goal is something else, then we deserve to know what that is." A silence followed, long and thick. Then to Lurie's shock, the Veil speaker rose. The Veil were old, not the oldest, but old enough that their words mattered. Their species spoke in layered tones like two voices at once. The chamber translated it into one. "Human envoy," the Veil said, "if the ban were lifted even partially, would humans fight if asked?" Ven's gaze lowered for a moment, then lifted again. "Humans would defend our people," Ven said, "and we would honor our treaties, but we do not want war. That is not a slogan. It is policy, it is culture. Our children grow up learning how easily war grows beyond its first reason." The Veil speaker's eyes narrowed. "That sounds learned, not instinct. Learned from what?" Ven held the Veil's gaze. "From history," Ven said. The mediator's platform floated a fraction higher, a subtle sign of caution. "Envoy Ven," the mediator said, "you requested to provide strategic support, yet you acknowledge that if drawn into conflict, humans would defend treaty obligations. That approaches participation." Ven nodded, "Which is why we are here, to define the boundary clearly, to remove the space where panic and rumor live." Lurie watched the elder delegates. They did not look convinced. They looked trapped like animals behind a closing door. The Keth archivist spoke again, voice lower. "Some boundaries," it said, "exist because the alternative is unthinkable." Ven's hands remained steady on the tablet, but Lurie noticed something else now. The human's breathing was controlled, as if they were holding back a stronger emotion. Not anger, not fear, restraint. The archivist continued. "Do you know what it means?" it asked. "When a species is banned from war, it means not only that they are feared, it means that their presence changes war itself. That is what the charter implies." Lurie felt a chill. Change war itself. How could a species do that? The human envoy spoke softly. "Then tell us," Ven said. "If our presence changes war, tell us how. We do not ask to be released from responsibility. We ask to be treated like adults, not ghosts." A faint stir moved across the chamber. Some delegates liked the boldness. Others recoiled. The word ghosts felt too accurate. The mediator raised a hand. "This is enough for the opening statement," it said. "The conquered will review the petition and the historical clauses attached to it." A younger delegate, one of the newer member species, bright-feathered and eager, stood suddenly. "With respect," they said, "why do we not simply vote? If humans have behaved peacefully, why keep an ancient ban?" The Enharan marshal's cane struck the floor with a sharp sound. The entire chamber flinched at once, even those far away. It was an old reflex, like a scar reacting to weather. The marshal's voice was cold. "Because," he said, "you are young and you think war is only ships and guns. You think it ends when treaties are signed. You think it is something that happens outside your homes and then stops. You do not know what it looks like when humans decide a war must never be allowed to happen again." The feathers on the young delegate's crest lowered. "I don't understand," they said. The marshal did not answer. He simply sat back down, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the human envoy like he was looking at a storm on the horizon. Ven stood quietly, as if accepting the silence as part of the price of speaking. The mediator's voice softened slightly, though it still carried authority. "Envoy Ven," it said, "you may remain in the observer gallery while we proceed with other matters. You will be called again when the conquered is prepared." Ven bowed once more. "Thank you," the human said. As the human turned to leave the central platform, Lurie noticed something small and strange. Several of the oldest delegates leaned back, not away from the human in disgust, but away in the way one steps back from a powerful machine. Not hatred. Not contempt, caution. The human walked toward the side gallery and took a seat behind a transparent barrier. They looked outward, watching the chamber with patient focus. The meeting moved on, but the air never fully recovered. Every trade dispute now sounded like a whisper in a burning house. Lurie leaned toward her assistant. "Rel," she murmured, "did you see the elders?" He nodded, eyes wide. "They were afraid." "Yes," Lurie said, "and not of what humans might do today." Rel swallowed. "Then what are they afraid of?" Lurie stared at the human envoy through the barrier. Ven sat with hands folded, posture calm, expression polite, a person like any other diplomat, almost ordinary, almost. "They are afraid," Lurie said, "of what they already saw once." Rel looked like he wanted to ask more, but he stopped. Even questions felt dangerous in this room. Lurie sat back, trying to keep her face neutral, but her mind was racing. If the ban was not about human violence, then what was it? What had humans done in that forgotten war that made the galaxy write a permanent rule into law? The meeting continued, and outside the windows, the stars kept drifting, indifferent and bright. Yet inside the Conquered's shining ring, a very old shadow had moved again, and everyone could feel it. The session ended hours later, but the tension it left behind did not fade with the lights. When the bell rang to signal recess, the delegates rose in clusters, speaking in low voices, glancing often toward the observer gallery. Envoy Mara Ven remained seated behind the transparent barrier, hands still folded, posture calm. From the outside, they looked like a figure in a display case. Inside, their mind worked carefully, step by step, measuring every reaction they had seen. The fear, the silence, the way the oldest species had avoided direct answers. Lurie stood and smoothed her coat. She hesitated, then did something that surprised even herself. Instead of following her usual path toward the diplomatic halls, she turned toward the observer gallery. Rel noticed and hurried after her. "Ambassador," he whispered, "are you sure?" "Humans are not restricted from speaking, but nothing," Lurie said. "If this chamber is going to keep pretending this problem is small, then someone needs to look at it up close." Security fields parted as she approached. The barrier shimmered, then cleared. Ven looked up as Lurie stepped inside the gallery. For a moment, neither spoke. Lurie studied the human carefully. The eyes were alert but not sharp. The face carried lines of tiredness that were not from age but from long responsibility. This was not a soldier. This was someone who carried words like tools. "I am Ambassador Lurie of the Sovan Triarchy," Lurie said at last. "I wanted to thank you for your honesty in the chamber." Ven stood and inclined their head. "You're welcome, Ambassador." Honesty is often the only thing we're allowed to bring into rooms like that. Lurie almost smiled at that, almost. "My assistant believes your petition is reasonable," Lurie said. "I am not sure yet, but I am sure of one thing: the ban is not based on rumor." "The elders know something they do not want to say." Ven nodded. "We know that much too." Rel hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether he should be present. Lurie gestured for him to stay. "Tell me," Lurie said, lowering her voice, "what do humans think really happened in that first war?" Ven did not answer right away. They looked out through the gallery window at the slow turn of the stars. "We think," Ven said, "that we survived something that should have erased us, and in surviving we learned a way of fighting that others decided should never be repeated." Lurie frowned. "That is very vague." "It has to be," Ven said. "Our records are broken. Entire sections are missing. The files we do have are labeled with old Conquered seals. That means the edits were not done by humans." Rel's eyes widened. "The Conquered erased your history?" "Not erased," Ven said gently. "Curated." The words sat between them, heavy and sharp. Before Lurie could reply, a deep voice spoke from behind them. "Some stories are too dangerous to be complete." They turned. The Keth archivist stood at the entrance to the gallery, tall and still, its shell catching the light like polished stone. Two Conquered guards hovered nearby, clearly uneasy about their presence so close to a human and a delegate. Lurie's heart sped up. "Archivist," she said, forcing calm into her voice. The archivist's many eyes focused on Ven. "Human envoy," it said, "you ask for clarity." "Ambassador Lurie asks for truth. You both pull at the same thread." Ven met the archivist's gaze. "Then perhaps it is time to see what it's tied to." The archivist was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was softer, like wind moving through old halls. "Walk with me," it said. Lurie hesitated. Rel's hands tightened at his sides. "This area is secure," the archivist added. "No weapons, no recorders, only memory." Ven nodded. "That seems fair." They followed the archivist out of the gallery and into a side corridor few delegates used. The walls here were not polished. They were rough, showing the asteroid's natural stone, marked with thin lines of light that guided the way. They walked in silence until they reached a circular chamber with a single platform in the center. Above it floated a sphere of dim light, flickering like a tired star. The archivist gestured for them to stand near the platform. "This is an archive node," it said. Not part of the public record, not part of any official system. It holds memory, not data. Lurie swallowed. Memory? The archivist extended a clawed hand. My people do not store all things in machines. Some events are kept in living minds, passed carefully with warning. Ven stepped forward, and this is one of those events. Yes, the archivist said, the war that made the conquered. The light sphere brightened. The air seemed to thicken like a storm about to break. Long ago, the archivist began, before humans were known beyond a handful of systems, the galaxy was divided into spheres of influence. Power was measured in fleets and stars claimed. There was no conquered, only alliances and betrayals. The light shifted, forming faint shapes. Stars, lines between them, moving dots like fleets. A coalition of old empires rose, the archivist continued. They believed the galaxy should be ordered, controlled. They expanded system by system. Species who resisted were broken. Species who complied were absorbed. Lurie felt a chill. And humans? Humans were small, the archivist said. New, barely noticed. Their space lay in the path of expansion, but they were not considered a threat. Ven's jaw tightened slightly. The coalition sent envoys, the archivist said. They demanded tribute, oversight, military access. Humans refused. The light showed a small cluster of stars standing alone as a larger shape pressed toward it. The coalition laughed, the archivist said. They sent a fleet expecting a lesson, not a war. The light flickered, showing ships meeting in space. The coalition's formation was clean and strong. The human side was scattered, uneven. They defeated humans in open battle, the archivist said. Again and again, human ships burned, worlds were lost. The coalition declared the war nearly over. Rel whispered, then how did humans win? The archivist's eyes shifted to him. They did not win the way you think of winning. The light changed. The coalition's fleet moved forward, but behind them, small points of light appeared in their wake. Humans stopped meeting fleets with fleets, the archivist said. They stopped defending worlds, they started watching. Watching? Lurie echoed. They studied supply lines. Communication routes, political ties between coalition members. They learned how the coalition held itself together. The light showed lines connecting the coalition's stars, then those lines thinning, breaking. They did not strike loudly, the archivist said. They struck quietly, a shipment delayed here, a message altered there, a treaty partner given proof of betrayal, a population shown that their rulers were lying. Ven spoke softly. They turned the coalition against itself. Yes, the archivist said, but more than that. They taught the galaxy a new idea. That war does not have to be fought where ships can see it. The light showed worlds fading, not from explosions, but from dimming trade, from unrest, from internal collapse. The coalition did not fall in a single battle, the archivist said. It unraveled member by member, system by system, not because humans conquered them, but because humans made them unable to hold what they had. Lurie felt her breath catch. That's not war, she said. It is, the archivist replied. It is simply war that does not announce itself. Rel looked pale. How long did it take? Decades, the archivist said. Longer than most species' attention spans. Humans waited, planned, adjusted. They remembered every loss, every broken world, and they never stopped. Ven closed their eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. When the coalition finally collapsed, the archivist continued, there was no capital to occupy, no leader to surrender. The galaxy was left with a lesson and a wound. The light sphere dimmed. The survivors gathered, the archivist said. My people, the Veil, the Enharan, others. We realized that if this way of fighting spread, no alliance, no empire, no peace could ever be stable again, because any conflict could become endless. Lurie whispered, so you formed the Conquered. Yes, the archivist said, to set rules, boundaries, places where war could be contained. And the ban on humans, Ven asked, the archivist's voice lowered. We feared that if humans were allowed to fight under Conquered law, their methods would become acceptable, teachable, repeatable. We feared a galaxy where every species learned to fight like humans had. Rel shook his head slowly. You banned them to protect everyone else. And to protect ourselves from becoming like them, the archivist said. Silence filled the chamber. Ven finally spoke. You make it sound like humans are monsters. The archivist looked at Ven for a long time. No, it said. We learned something worse. You are not monsters. You are people who do not forget. Lurie felt that sentence settle into her bones. The archivist turned slightly. Most species fight to win, it said. Humans fought to make sure they would never have to fight the same enemy twice. Ven's voice was quiet. We call that survival. And we, the archivist said, call it transformation. Lurie stepped forward. You hid this from the younger species. Yes, the archivist said, because fear spreads faster than understanding. We wanted a galaxy built on trust, not on stories of quiet collapse. Rel looked at Lurie. But now the story is coming out anyway. The archivist inclined its head. Yes, because humans are asking questions, and because the galaxy is once again at war. Ven straightened. Then you know why we asked to help. If another empire starts to fight like the Coalition did, the Conquered's rules will not stop them. And if they start to fight like we did, the archivist finished the thought, then the galaxy will not survive unchanged. They all stood in silence, the dim light flickering between them like a fragile thing. Lurie exhaled slowly. You are afraid of humans teaching others how to fight like humans. Yes, the archivist said, and we are afraid of humans being forced to fight that way again. Ven's hands curled into loose fists, then relaxed. We don't want to become that either. Rel looked between them. Then what happens now? The archivist turned toward the exit. Now, it said, the Conquered must decide whether to keep a dangerous truth buried or risk a dangerous misunderstanding growing in the dark. They walked back through the rough corridors toward the bright heart of the Conquered. The polished halls felt different now, thinner, like a shell over something deeper and more fragile. As they reached the main chamber, alarms did not sound. No fleet appeared on the screens. The galaxy outside still looked calm and endless. But Lurie knew something had already changed. In the observer gallery, Ven took their seat again, face calm, posture steady. To anyone watching, they were still just a diplomat behind glass. But now Lurie saw them differently. Not as a threat, not as a hero, but as a reminder. That some wars never end. The Conquered chamber felt smaller the next day, even though nothing about its size had changed. The same ring of seats curved around the open center. The same stars drifted past the wide windows. Yet the air seemed heavier, like it carried the memory of the archivist's words. Lurie took her place early again. She watched delegates arrive with new caution. The younger species still spoke freely, unaware of what had been shared in the hidden chamber. The older ones moved with quiet tension, eyes sharper, voices lower. Across the room in the observer gallery, Envoy Mara Ven sat behind the transparent barrier. Calm, still, patient, Rel leaned close. Ambassador, he whispered, I didn't sleep. Lurie nodded. Neither did I. The bell rang. The light line traced the circle. The mediator rose. Delegates, it said, today we continue discussion of humanity's petition, but before we proceed, a report has been submitted to the Conquered. A soft murmur moved through the chamber. The mediator gestured, and a projection appeared in the open space above the platform. It showed a cluster of stars on the edge of Conquered territory. This system, the mediator said, belongs to a neutral trade alliance. Last cycle it was attacked by the Dravari Imperium. 3 stations were disabled, civilian ships were stranded. The image shifted, showing broken shapes floating in space. Lurie felt a chill. The Dravari, she whispered. They've been pushing borders for years, Rel nodded, but never this openly. The mediator continued. Several Conquered members offered defensive fleets. However, response time was delayed due to jurisdictional debate. Casualties are still being assessed. The younger delegates stirred, uneasy. This was exactly the kind of delay Ven had spoken about. The mediator's gaze swept the chamber. Envoy Ven, you requested the ability to provide support in such situations. Do you wish to speak? Ven stood behind the barrier. The field shimmered as their voice carried into the chamber. Yes, Ven said. We received distress calls from that system. Our rescue ships were the closest in range. Under current law, they were not permitted to enter an active conflict zone. By the time clearance was granted, the Dravari had withdrawn. A delegate from the Lumen Guild spoke sharply. Are you saying humans could have prevented this? I am saying, Ven replied, that humans could have helped, pulled survivors from damaged stations, delivered medical aid, stabilized power systems. We had ships loaded for disaster relief. They waited in open space while people waited in the dark. The room fell quiet. Lurie felt the weight of the words press into her chest. This was not theory anymore. This was now. The Enharan Marshal rose slowly. You speak of rescue, he said. But your people's history is not one of simple rescue. How do we know that support does not become influence? Ven met his gaze. How do you know it doesn't already? They asked gently. Every species here brings influence when they help. The difference is our hands are tied before we even reach the door. The mediator raised a hand, signaling for calm. The conquered will hear a counter-statement. The veil speaker stood. Our concern, it said, is not what humans do in the first moment of aid, it is what follows. Influence can grow quietly, trust can turn into dependence. Ven nodded. That is true for everyone, they said, which is why the conquered exists, to watch each other. Lurie leaned back, her thoughts spinning. The archivist's story echoed in her mind. Quiet strikes. Long memory, war that did not end. A new voice rose, the young feathered delegate from the previous session. With respect, they said, we cannot let fear of the past paralyze the present. People are suffering now. Several delegates murmured agreement. The mediator's eyes glowed faintly. Fear and caution are not the same thing, it said, but both deserve space in this chamber. A signal light blinked on a console near the archivist's seat. The Keth archivist rose, slow and deliberate. I request permission to address the conquered, it said. The chamber stilled. Even the mediator hesitated, then nodded. You may speak. The archivist stepped forward into the open space. Its shell reflected the stars, making it look like a piece of the night itself had moved closer. Many of you, it said, were not present when the conquered was formed. Many of you were not yet species. You see the ban on humans as a rule without a story. That is our fault. A ripple of surprise passed through the room. We believed, the archivist continued, that by hiding the past we could prevent its shadow from shaping the future, but shadows grow longer when the light is small. Lurie's breath caught. The archivist was doing it. It was bringing the hidden story into the open. Humans, it said, once fought a war that did not end with victory or defeat but with collapse. They did not take territory. They took away the ability to continue. They made war itself unstable. The younger delegates shifted, confused and uneasy. That is why the ban exists, the archivist said. Not because humans are cruel, but because their way of surviving war changed how war could be fought. Ven remained still, eyes forward. The mediator spoke carefully. Archivist, are you suggesting that humans present a unique risk to galactic stability? I am suggesting, the archivist replied, that humans present a unique potential. For destruction, yes, but also for something else. Lurie leaned forward. What something else? The archivist turned slightly toward her. For ending wars in ways that make starting them difficult. The chamber murmured louder now. The Enharan marshal snorted. That is a dangerous way to speak about collapse. It is, the archivist agreed, but it is also honest. The mediator raised both hands. Enough, this session is becoming philosophical. We must return to policy. Before it could continue, a sharp tone cut through the air. A priority signal. The projection above the platform flickered, then changed. New stars appeared. New damage reports. A conquered aide spoke quickly. Another system has been struck. Dravari forces engaged a supply hub near the Cora Reach. Communications are unstable. The room erupted in voices. Lurie felt her pulse quicken. This was no longer a single incident. This was a pattern. The mediator called for order. Delegates, silence! Gradually, the noise died down. The mediator turned to the chamber. The Conquered's response fleet is mobilizing. However, it will take several cycles to reach the Cora Reach. Ven spoke not loudly but clearly. Our ships can be there in half that time. Every eye turned toward the observer gallery. The mediator hesitated. Under current law, Ven said, we will wait. Under current reality, people will be alone. The feathered delegate stood again. Then change the law. The Enharan marshal rose at the same time. Do not be foolish. The room split, voices rising. Lurie stood. She did not plan to, but her legs moved anyway. Honored mediator, she said, her voice steady, this chamber can debate the past for 100 cycles. The Dravari are acting now. If we deny aid because of what humans once did, then we become part of what they are doing. The room quieted. Lurie surprised herself with the strength in her own words. The mediator studied her. What do you propose, ambassador? Lurie glanced at Ven, then back at the mediator. A limited trial. Allow human rescue and medical ships to enter the Cora Reach under direct Conquered oversight. No weapons, no strategic systems, just hands and tools. The Enharan marshal shook his head. Once the door opens, then we watch it, Lurie said, closely, together. The veil speaker tilted its head. And if humans use this to build influence, then we address that, Lurie replied, not by letting people bleed while we argue about shadows. The mediator floated higher, its form glowing brighter. This decision carries risk. "So does doing nothing," Lurie said. Silence followed. The mediator turned slowly, taking in the faces of the delegates. "At this moment," it said, "the conquered must choose between its oldest fear and its newest responsibility." A voting light appeared at each seat. Lurie's heart hammered as she placed her hand on the panel. A soft glow answered. One by one, lights flared around the ring, some bright, some dark. Rel held his breath. The tally finished. The mediator's voice carried across the chamber. By narrow margin, the Conquered authorizes a temporary, supervised deployment of human non-combat vessels to the Coral Reach. A wave of reaction passed through the room. Relief, anger, worry, hope. Ven closed their eyes for a brief second, then opened them. "Thank you," they said quietly. The mediator added, "This is not a lifting of the ban. This is an exception. Any violation will end the trial." Ven bowed. "Understood." The session ended in a rush. Delegates filed out, voices loud and uncertain. Lurie remained seated, feeling like she had stepped onto a bridge made of thin glass. Rel whispered, "Did we just change history?" Lurie answered honestly. "We opened a door. We don't know what's on the other side." Hours later, in the Conquered's quiet docking ring, human ships prepared to depart. Lurie stood on an observation platform, watching through the wide glass. The ships were not war vessels. They were smooth and rounded, painted in soft colors, marked with clear symbols of medical aid and rescue. Lights blinked along their sides like slow heartbeats. Ven stood beside her. "You got your chance," Lurie said. Ven nodded. "We got a test." "Are you nervous?" Lurie asked. Ven considered. "We've waited a long time to be allowed to help openly. That makes this feel fragile." Lurie looked at the ships. "The archivist told me what humans did in the past, about the coalition." Ven's shoulders tightened slightly. "Then you know why this matters." "I know why they are afraid," Lurie said. "I'm trying to understand why you are not." Ven looked at her. "We are afraid," they said, "but we are also tired of being defined by the worst thing our ancestors had to do to survive." The first ship drifted away from the dock, engines glowing softly. Another followed. Rel watched, wide-eyed. "They look so peaceful." "They are," Ven said. "That's the point." Lurie folded her arms. "And if the Dravari attack them?" Ven's gaze hardened for just a moment. "Then the Conquered will see what happens when you attack people who only came to save." The ship slipped into the star lane, becoming streaks of light. Lurie felt a strange mix of hope and dread. Somewhere beyond the bright windows, the galaxy waited. And for the first time in generations, humanity was stepping back into its storms, not as a weapon, but as a hand reaching into the dark. Whether the dark would accept that hand, the Cora Reach system lay ahead like a fragile jewel in black silk. Stars glittered coldly around it, indifferent to the lives inside. Ven's ships moved in careful formation, engines quiet but steady, cutting through the silent void with precision. Each vessel carried medical teams, engineers, and supplies. No weapons, no fleet maneuvers, just hands and knowledge. Lurie watched from the observation deck of the Conquered's nearby station, heart pounding. She had read reports and listened to debates, but this was different. The humans were actually moving into an active conflict zone. Her pulse quickened at the thought, yet she could not look away. Rel stood beside her, fingers gripping the railing. "They are so calm," he whispered. "After everything we've heard, after the history, they are just walking into it." "They have no choice," Lurie replied, "and they know what is at stake." Meanwhile, Ven spoke over the comms to their fleet. "Maintain formation, scan for survivors. Avoid engagement unless absolutely necessary. This is a mission of aid, not retaliation." The ships drifted closer to the Cora Reach system, where the Dravari Imperium had struck. The sensors picked up damage, stations fractured, communication nodes dead, transport ships floating adrift. Lurie watched the images projected on the observation screen, each frame a frozen moment of panic and confusion. Ven's voice came over the comms again. "Begin rescue operations. Prioritize civilian transport pods and stranded personnel. Medical teams deploy triage." The human crews worked methodically. Small shuttles launched from the larger vessels, threading through the wreckage with careful precision. Engineers aboard each ship began repairing the smallest of vital systems: life support, power channels, environmental controls. Every action was deliberate, calm, and efficient. Lurie could feel the eyes of the Conquered delegates on her, even from the station. They had allowed this, and now they were witnesses. Many older delegates avoided looking directly at the human ships. Fear lingered in their movements, subtle but present, Younger species whispered nervously, unsure of what to expect. Hours passed. Shuttles carried civilians to the human fleet, where triage teams worked under calm lights. Families were reunited. Injuries were treated. Panic was slowly replaced by relief, though the Dravari presence still hung like a shadow at the edge of sensor ranges. Ven moved from ship to ship, speaking to commanders, offering guidance and observing. Their calm demeanor inspired confidence. Even the new human recruits, many seeing their first active deployment, moved with steady hands. Lurie noticed a rhythm in their work, almost like a quiet dance, precise and controlled. Rel leaned closer. "Ambassador, they are different. I've read history, but seeing it, they are alive in it, not just remembering it." Lurie nodded. "They learned the lessons of survival and patience. That is their strength, and now they are applying it." Meanwhile, the Dravari detected the human presence. A small fleet moved to intercept, their sensors alerting them to the incoming ships. They expected hesitation, disorder, perhaps fear. They did not expect calm. Ven's voice echoed across the comm channels. "Dravari forces are not to be engaged unless civilians are threatened. Maintain distance, continue observation, and prepare contingency evacuation." The Dravari ships hovered, uncertain. The humans were unarmed, yet precise. There was a quiet authority in their movements, a sense of control that made even the Dravari hesitate. Ven issued orders to their fleet. "Set up perimeter, monitor all approaches. Maintain strict defensive protocols. Do not provoke, do not escalate." The Dravari attempted minor maneuvers, probing the human fleet. Each time, Ven responded calmly, repositioning ships to shield civilians, redirecting shuttles, and stabilizing damaged stations. Hours turned into cycles. The human fleet moved steadily, securing the stations and transport lines. Engineers repaired communication nodes, reconnecting systems that had been offline for weeks. Medical teams worked tirelessly, saving lives that might otherwise have been lost to exposure or injury. From the observation deck, Lurie could see the tension in the chamber dissipate. Some of the older delegates relaxed slightly, though their eyes remained wary. Younger species began to murmur in astonishment. The humans, unarmed and disciplined, were changing the balance simply by presence and efficiency. Ven stood on the bridge of the lead ship, observing the operation. "Medical teams, prioritize triage zones 1 through 3. Evacuate all non-critical personnel to secondary stations. Engineers, stabilize the damaged energy grids. Keep communication channels open. Maintain calm. We are here to save lives, not to fight." The Dravari hesitated further, unsure how to respond. There was no provocation, only controlled action. Every maneuver by the humans was measured, precise, and deliberate. The Imperium's forces did not engage. They watched, as if witnessing a force they could not predict. Lurie spoke softly to Rel. "Do you understand now why the ban exists?" Rel nodded slowly. "It's not just about fighting, it's about the effect humans have on war itself. They don't destroy, they reshape. Even without weapons, they change everything." The human fleet continued operations. Shuttles returned with more civilians. Engineers worked in zero gravity to repair critical systems. Medical teams triaged injuries with meticulous care. Each action, while simple on its own, created a chain reaction. Civilian confidence returned. Communication channels opened. Local systems stabilized. Panic gave way to coordination. By the end of the second cycle, the situation was under control. The Cora Reach system had not only survived the initial attack, but was recovering faster than anyone had predicted. The human presence had turned chaos into order without firing a single shot. From the observation deck, Lurie watched Ven, calm, patient, precise, not commanding with fear but with discipline and understanding. The effectiveness was undeniable. Rel whispered, "They didn't fight, and yet they won." "They didn't need to fight," Lurie replied. "They simply acted better than anyone else could in the same situation." Ven looked up at the observation deck as if sensing their presence. Their eyes held a quiet strength that was neither arrogant nor aggressive, just understanding. They were fully aware of the impact of their actions. The Dravari fleet, still lingering at the edges, began to retreat slowly. Not because they had been attacked, but because they recognized control and efficiency when they saw it. The humans had shifted the balance without violence. Lurie exhaled slowly. This is why the elders feared them." Ven spoke over the comms, voice calm. Cora Reach secured. Begin returning civilians to home systems. Maintain communication and support. We leave no one behind. The fleet executed orders flawlessly. Systems stabilized. Civilians moved to safety. Stations were operational again. Human ships unarmed had restored balance. From the conquered station, delegates watched silently. The younger species murmured in admiration. The older ones, though still wary, could not hide the respect in their eyes. Lurie leaned on the railing, watching the stars. "This is only one system," she said quietly, "but it changes everything. If humans act like this in every crisis, they could reshape the galaxy again." Rel swallowed. "They already have, just by being themselves." Ven addressed the fleet one last time before pulling away. "Return to designated patrol points. Stand by for new directives. Remember our mission: aid, not engagement. Observe, stabilize, and ensure safety." The fleet moved away from Cora Reach, leaving behind a system no longer broken. Ships were steady. Civilians were safe. Order had returned, and all of it had been done without weapons, without aggression, without chaos, just disciplined, thoughtful action. Lurie turned to Rel. "Now you see it. The humans aren't dangerous in the traditional sense. They are dangerous because of what they can accomplish, even when they choose not to fight." Rel nodded, eyes wide. "They're different, better somehow." From the observation deck, Lurie watched the human fleet disappear into the void. Calm, deliberate, unarmed, and yet more powerful than any fleet the Conquered had ever controlled. The galaxy would remember this day, whether it understood it fully or not. Ven, aboard the lead ship, allowed themselves a small moment to breathe. The mission had succeeded. Lives were saved, systems stabilized. The Dravari threat had been mitigated without bloodshed. They understood why the ban existed, and they also understood why sometimes exceptions had to be made. The Conquered would take note. Other species would take note. But most importantly, the humans had taken note of themselves. For the first time in generations, they acted not out of survival alone, but out of responsibility. And in doing so, they demonstrated what humanity could be when guided by patience, wisdom, and unshakable discipline. And somewhere deep in the silence of space, the shadow of the past war whispered its approval. The galaxy had been touched by human hands once more, quietly, efficiently, inevitably. No one could say what would come next, but one thing was certain: the world would never see war in the same way again. The human fleet left Cora Reach behind, gliding silently through the void. Each vessel moved with precise coordination, engines whispering as they returned to patrol points. The stations were stable, civilians safe, communication networks restored, not a single life lost to delay or chaos. The human mission was complete. Envoy Mara Ven stood on the bridge of the lead ship, looking out at the trail of stars they left behind. Every movement had been deliberate, every decision measured, nothing wasted. The success was quiet, almost invisible, but undeniable. From the Conquered observation deck, Lurie and Rel watched as the last ship slipped into the distance. A hush had fallen over the chamber. Delegates remained in their seats, absorbing the outcome. Even the older species, still wary, could not hide the respect in their eyes. The mediator's voice broke the silence. "The Conquered has witnessed human intervention. The results are clear. Lives were saved, systems stabilized, order restored." A younger delegate from the Lumen Guild spoke up. "And without combat, without weapons, without fleets of destruction, it was remarkable." The Enheran Marshal leaned back, eyes narrowed. "Remarkable, yes, but we cannot ignore what humans represent. Their presence alters the very nature of conflict. They do not fight like us. They fight differently. And that difference is dangerous." Lurie whispered to Rel. "Dangerous, yes, but not in the way anyone expects." Rel nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "They change war without violence. They change strategy without threats. They reshape outcomes just by being present." Ven spoke over the comms, addressing the Conquered. "Our mission is complete. All civilians are secured. All systems stabilized. No engagement occurred. We have acted within the boundaries set by the Conquered. We request return clearance to Solarian space." The mediator inclined its head. "Clearance granted. The Conquered commends your efficiency and discipline. The procedure demonstrated by human forces has exceeded expectation and set a precedent." Even as the formal approval echoed across the chamber, Lurie felt a ripple of unease. Precedents once set could not be ignored. Humans had demonstrated power without traditional warfare. The implications were enormous. Ven's ships adjusted course, engines burning quietly, and began the journey home, Every move was precise, every decision exact. There was no hesitation. They carried not weapons, but knowledge, discipline, and a quiet authority that had shifted the perception of every species watching. Rel turned to Lurie. Do you think the others will ever accept this? That humans can act like this and not break the conquered? Lurie shook her head slowly. Some will, most will fear it. Humans are too unpredictable in the ways that matter. The conquered feared it once, and now they have seen it again. In the days that followed, news of the mission spread through the conquered faster than anyone anticipated. Reports of the Coral Reach operation circulated among delegates, historians, and trade guilds. Videos of the human shuttles navigating damaged stations, engineers stabilizing power grids, and medical teams treating civilians were transmitted across communication networks. Young species whispered among themselves, inspired by the efficiency and discipline. Older species debated quietly in chambers, weighing the effectiveness against the historical fear. Rumors of human restraint, skill, and endurance began to circulate alongside older tales of war and collapse. Ven remained calm throughout, watching from the bridge of the lead ship. They understood the impact of their actions. They had not fought to destroy. They had not sought glory, yet their presence had reshaped the perception of humans across the galaxy. Back in the conquered chamber, Lurie observed the ripple effects. Delegates were quieter now, more attentive. Conversations that had once been dominated by debate now included consideration of human methodology. The younger species asked questions about protocols, strategy, and decision-making, fascinated by the effectiveness of the human mission. The Enharan Marshal remained silent in the corner, hands resting on his cane. His face betrayed cautious respect, though he would not openly admit it. The humans had proven that they could operate in ways no other species had. The potential was immense, and with potential came unease. Ven addressed the fleet one last time before entering deep space transit. We have completed our mission. Maintain vigilance. Return to designated patrol points. Document all findings. Our presence must remain a demonstration, not a precedent. The conquered will determine future involvement. Observe, record, and be prepared. The ship slipped into the void, becoming streaks of light among countless stars. The Coral Reach system was no longer a site of chaos, but a symbol of what disciplined, thoughtful intervention could accomplish. Rel turned to Lurie, voice soft. They didn't just save lives, they changed how we see what is possible. Yes, Lurie said, eyes fixed on the fading light of the human ships. And that is why the ban exists. Not because humans are violent, but because they can transform conflict in ways no one else can, even without weapons. The days that followed saw a quiet transformation in the conquered. Delegates approached negotiations differently, taking lessons from human efficiency, patience, and disciplined action. Disputes were handled with greater attention to detail, crises were managed more strategically, and coordination between species improved. Some older delegates still feared the implications. They remembered the original war, the collapse, and the lesson that humans left behind centuries ago. But they could not deny the effect of the recent mission. Lurie met Ven one final time before their departure to Solarian space. The human envoy stood calmly, as always, eyes steady. You have done more than deliver aid, Lurie said. You have reminded everyone of what humans can do even without violence. Ven nodded. That was the intention, to show capability without coercion. To demonstrate that efficiency, patience, and discipline can have power equal to or greater than force. Lurie looked at the stars trailing behind the departing fleet. The conquered will remember this day. They will, Ven said softly. And perhaps they will remember what humans are capable of, not for war, but for preservation and aid. Rel whispered, Do you think the ban will ever be lifted? Ven's gaze remained on the horizon. Perhaps one day, but it is not the point. The point is understanding. Knowing what humans can do and choosing carefully when to involve them. That is enough for now. The fleet disappeared into transit lanes, leaving the conquered to absorb the lessons of the mission. Lurie and Rel stood silently, watching the last light fade. The galaxy had witnessed human efficiency, patience, and strategy. It had witnessed the way humans could reshape outcomes without firing a single shot. The Coral Reach system slowly returned to normal. Civilian operations resumed. Trade routes reopened. Communication networks stabilized. People who had feared for their lives returned home safely. And all of this had been accomplished by humans, disciplined and deliberate, moving with quiet authority. The conquered would never see war in the same way again. Stories of the mission spread among delegates, influencing thought, strategy, and policy. Humans had not taken territory, not commanded fleets, not wielded weapons. Yet their presence alone had shifted the balance, reminding everyone that conflict could be managed, crises could be solved, and lives could be saved without destruction. And somewhere deep in the quiet of space, the memory of the ancient human war lingered. Its lessons were clear now. Humanity had survived by patience, discipline, and intellect. Humanity had reshaped the galaxy, not with fleets of destruction, but with hands and minds, moving with precision and care. The elders of the conquered would remember. The younger species would learn. And humanity, once banned from war, had reminded the galaxy that sometimes the greatest power lies not in weapons, but in the ability to act wisely when chaos looms. Ven's ships continued towards Solarian space, leaving behind not fear, not violence, but a new understanding. Humanity was no longer a question mark or a ghost of forgotten wars. They were a reminder, a force for change. A measure of what discipline, patience, and care could accomplish. Lurie watched them go, her heart both heavy and light. The galaxy had been touched by human hands once more, quietly, efficiently, inevitably. And she knew with certainty that no conflict would ever feel the same again. Humans had returned to the galaxy not as warriors but as stewards, not as conquerors but as catalysts. The stars moved as always. The galaxy spun on, but something had shifted. The echo of human presence lingered in every system touched by their mission. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet undeniable. The conquered had seen the power of calm, the strength of restraint, and the effect of thoughtful action. And for the first time in generations, every species in the chamber understood that humans were not simply participants in history. They were forces that could shape it, without violence, without dominance, and without fear. The galaxy would remember. And the humans would continue to watch, ready to act, disciplined and patient, waiting for the moment when their abilities might be needed again. But for now, they returned home, leaving systems safer, lives preserved, and the conquered wiser. Humanity had reminded the galaxy why they had once been banned from war, and in doing so, they had shown the real reason for the fear. Humans do not just fight. Humans transform, and that was a power no one could ignore.